Shazam in 3D. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Dunder and Blixen. I love how these demonic reindeer are always reaching out to the camera like an old-fashioned thriller, perhaps from the 50s, though they only wish they had graphics so good back then, but they would have made wonderful use of it. This was originally released in April of 2019, but takes place at an unspecified point in the Christmas season. Decorations of one sort or another fill every other scene. Even in flashback sequences, it remains the Christmas season. In North America, this was among the very last 3D Blu-rays to be available at the retail level. There was, maybe 3 more titles released after, which incidentally were all Warner titles. The 3D is great fun. It's of this style that makes small spaces, like the interior of a car, feel massive. Big. Everything inside feels big. The orphan home feels massive, like a mansion inside. Notice how large this room looks. And then compare this to the view outside the window, which shows far less space between the house and the trees out back. There are frequent moments where the background is left flat, though. Sometimes it's entirely reasonable. For example, here, where the camera tracks the bad man, the background is moving so fast any 3D detail would probably be lost anyway. Here, we have a simple dialogue moment. And although in the back there's a section of brick that goes at a 90-degree angle, the whole thing is also left as a flat canvas. Elsewhere, you'll find some brief vistas that, when seen in 3D, the flatness of the background creates kind of like the appearance of an old-fashioned rear projection effect. And in other shots, we might get 1 or 2 foreground elements, and then the background essentially curtains off, which overall I would suggest is not really that noticeable. Part of the reason is, again, they make the rooms feel so big. It seems as long as it's far enough away, the eye just isn't looking for that detail. I wonder if the bigness I've described isn't so much to impress, but a way to have the depth fall off at an exponential rate. This drive toward making things seem bigger does also help the feel of the story, as this is told from the perspective of kids, and it's appropriate that the world feels big and imposing, though I imagine that connection is probably accidental. Look at this bus shot. By falling off a bridge, this bus has stretched to 3 times its length, and inside it looks like this guy is falling off the Titanic. Just great fun and a perfect example of 3D adding a level of excitement to a movie. One thing which we see displayed often is deep, classic 3D hallways and corridors. This is great in the Wizard's Hall, giving this super ominous feel. But it's also appreciated in the school hallway scenes, which frankly are often not the most exciting parts of the movie, so it's a way to add some fun to those moments. Particles are beautiful as always, but I did catch one moment where they just sort of do a clumsy pinch to achieve their 3D effect. However, you really do have to pause to notice it. And here you'll see how they cropped out Billy for the 3D version. Now this is a nice 3D moment. Cages always look good, and I imagine must be a lot of work to convert. Judging by how affected the texture on the window is, I wonder if they cropped out the grill and reconstructed the whole window pane. Now here, in the upper left, notice they didn't try to convert the light going through the window. I guess you have to pick your 3D battles. There are a moment of neat reflections that have been converted well. This office scene is particularly good. It looks like they did a lot of work here to make it happen, changing the entire background to taste. You also see something similar on storefront windows. It looks like the display items are given their own space and are allowed to cut through the reflection layer. When they exit this store, it looks like everything inside the store was manipulated for this shot. This BB gun moment is nice. Even though there isn't much to it, it feels like a classic 3D opportunity to poke an eye out, and it doesn't disappoint. Although, regardless of how close we get, they never manipulate the rotation on the ball bearing. So it's essentially a flat cutout, but the movement in the scene obscures that detail. Now, story-wise in the movie, there's a recurring point of trying to figure out a name for our superhero. And unless I missed it, I think he remains unnamed by the end. Before Marvel Comics existed, the character with the yellow thunderbolt was known as Captain Marvel, and his orphan siblings were the Marvel family. Under that name, he was very popular during World War II, probably a time of many people feeling scared and alone, like an orphan. And this was actually the first comic turned into a movie, also in the 40s. By the 1960s, though, Captain Marvel had largely disappeared to history. Marvel Comics, which was new and successful, and somewhat annoyed that there existed a comic they didn't own with their name on it. They launched an unrelated Captain Marvel as a legal maneuver to keep the past in the past. Eventually, in the 70s, the rights went to DC, who renamed the series to Shazam, although the superhero was still named Captain Marvel within the story, both in print and television. Really, right up until Marvel Studios was sold to Disney. Now, how is this a Christmas movie? When I first saw this in theater, I didn't notice any connection. It seemed to be used like paint for decoration only. But on closer reflection, I noticed the plot could be summed up as follows. The blessing of the gods granted only to someone who is able to resist sin. This someone then, in turn, shares their blessing with adopted brothers and sisters who are not required to pass the same test, and together they battle evil. This might actually, perhaps accidentally, be the most Christian superhero movie ever made. Well, Merry Christmas and a 3D New Year.